Imagine being healthy, 17 and full of life, and then losing absolutely everything.
This is my story of survival, hope, and recovery from severe MECFS. If you're struggling, please don't give up. There is hope, and we're here to help you find it.
I think that it's really important that you know Elliot's story. We really do get what living with very severe MECFS feels like.
I'm going to leave my mum to tell you all about it, but I'll be back later with a fun fact.
Look forward to that. In this video, we're going to talk about how ill Elliot really was and the challenges that we faced, especially from the medical community. But then in future videos, we're not really going to get too hung up on the problems and the politics, because I know you're all really aware of those and dealing with them all the time. We just want this channel to be one of hope and encouragement, where we can share the information that we've learned that's helped Elliot. So we really do hope that you're going to find real value in these videos for your own journey. So let's start in the beginning. 7 years ago, Elliot was running 10 kilometers regularly. He was really fit and active, but he just slowly started getting weaker and weaker until by May 2018, he could no longer work. He was unable to read, he couldn't watch telly, he couldn't listen to music or play his cello that he loves, he couldn't see his friends, and he couldn't spend time with us as a family. Basically, at that point, he'd become 90% bedbound and he was in intense pain. Food just really reacted with him badly. He was just in a mess. So at this point, he'd just turned 17 and he was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And we really didn't believe that it could get any worse than that, but it really did. He just carried on declining. He would only literally leave the house to get to hospital appointments, and every medical appointment caused him to get so much worse. Unfortunately, we agreed to him having a week in hospital, and that was just a complete disaster. We assumed that he was going to be tested, but when he got there, the only thing they were interested in testing was his feet. Anyway, we learned pretty quickly that protecting his scant energy levels was the top priority, especially for non-essential medical appointments with people that just didn't understand his condition. I'm not going to tell you too much about the bad things. We were really fortunate to change our doctor from one that said Elliot was above his pay grade and wouldn't touch him. We did find another GP who actually had the condition herself, and she gave us some really wonderful advice. It was about B vitamins, and that set us off in the right direction on this health treasure hunt, and I really can't thank her enough. So Elliot's pain and his solitude continued, and still his energy levels just carried on declining, even though he really wasn't doing much. He stopped being able to walk to the bathroom, which was a challenge. We had to suddenly find a commode to put next to his bed very quickly. Gradually, things like hair washing and hair cutting just became really rare, and then just completely stopped. Then in December 2019, he became really ill, and it became apparent that he was going to need extra medical help. He'd had a week of vomiting everything that he ate and drank, so our GP admitted him into the hospital in the hope that he was going to be given a feeding tube to save him the energy of actually eating and to try and stabilise his condition. So we wondered, it just couldn't get any worse than this, but we knew that the effort of going into the hospital again was going to cause him much more suffering, but we just didn't think that there was a choice. We just had to try and keep him alive. Obviously, there's no ME specialist in a hospital, and no one had a clue what to do with him. There was no chance of him being given a private room because the hospital was already overflowing with flu patients, and the effort of going into the hospital had used up every last bit of his energy. So when he was there, he just couldn't even get to the commode next to the bed. So that meant the nurses had to give me a crash course on personal care for somebody that is completely bedridden. They just didn't understand how ill he was. They would come up to me or come up to Elliot, and it would be constantly, I know he's just a little bit tired, but can't he just do something? They just don't get it. So basically, he was just rehydrated and stabilised, and he was under the care of a neurologist who had no interest in MECFS at all. The specialist just refused to consider tube feeding or any further testing. I'd gone into the hospital prepared with a big wad of research and different tests that I was really hoping that they would carry out on Elliot, because at this point in time, there was no reason why Elliot was so ill medically. And there was one point where he had a huddle of students around because, again, they were fascinated by his feet. Also, while he was in hospital, his heart suddenly started going at 240 beats per minute, which was really scary. I was glad that he was in hospital when that happened. That week was absolutely horrendous. I spent the whole week camped on a chair next to him. I had to stay with him for several reasons because, one, he couldn't toilet himself, he couldn't feed himself, he couldn't reach or ring the call bell to communicate what he needed. He couldn't even hold his own drinks. It was a really highly stimulating and sensory environment that was just using energy that Elliot didn't have. It was a big waste of time because not one single doctor had a conversation about what could be done to help him. They just kept repeating that tube feeding wasn't going to be appropriate. And so the gastric team weren't even informed of Elliot's presence in the hospital. So did things get worse? He was sent home 7 days later, and the payback from that horrendous week in hospital caused him to crash so badly that for over 2 years, we had to spend 8 or 9 hours a day spoon feeding him. We had to be completely silent. He could only manage a teaspoon of food every 15 minutes or so. And if we tried to push him any quicker, he would just vomit it back up, which was really frustrating. If we'd just spent 4 hours feeding him his lunch, it was such a struggle for him to try and swallow. He was just so thin and malnourished. Every day just felt like we were in a battle to keep him alive. So he couldn't hold a drink. He couldn't even turn himself. I had to get up in the night to turn him to make sure he didn't get bed sores. We had to use the bed sheets to pull him up the bed or to turn him. And he could hardly talk, he couldn't listen or move. And his heart was just constantly racing at 140 beats per minute, even though he was literally doing nothing. He had vertigo, he was in awful pain, especially his stomach. He had constant nausea and he was just burping all the time, which was another reason getting food into him was really difficult. So it really is very hard to convey how bad things were at that time. For Elliot, it was horrendous, but also for the family living in the home with Elliot in that condition was just awful. Every day was literally just terrifying because we knew that there was absolutely nothing that the local hospital was going to do to help him. And this lasted for several years, with Elliot's care taking 80 or 90 hours a week. And most of that time was literally just trying to get food into him really slowly. So during that time, the government released new guidelines, and they included guidance on tube feeding. So that was good news then. Well, I wish it was. I spent many months corresponding with the hospital's gastric team, also with a prominent MECFS professor, and also the hospital's patient advice and liaison service, trying to work out an emergency backup plan in case things took another turn for the worst with Elliot, which, considering we were slap bang in the middle of the COVID pandemic, was a real possibility if he had caught the bug. It was just impossible to get support from the medical services. Elliot is just really lucky that he was part of a family and we could work together as a team. My husband managed to keep working, and my other son, who was still at school, ran the house. And we had really lovely friends who cooked meals for us at that time, and others that came and helped Elliot to eat, because his care was just taking so much time and he needed such specific food, which I had to research and had to make sure that every teaspoon of food that he was getting was as nutrient dense as possible without it causing him bad reactions. It was just really time consuming. And I know how incredibly lucky Elliot was to have this support, because I know that so many of you are dealing with these issues alone or with really little support, and that it just breaks my heart. So during this time, while we were trying to keep Elliot alive, Maeve Boothby O'Neill was going through the same thing, and I was with her mum in several groups online. And I just remember her begging for the tube feeding in a nearby hospital, and she was just constantly being denied. And I just remember reading her mum's updates in horror until eventually Maeve died of malnourishment. And apparently now the hospital has prepared a care plan and is able to liaise with other hospitals with the lessons that they learned. So I truly hope that nobody has to go through this ordeal ever again, because it is so frightening when you can't get food into somebody that's so ill. The reason I'm telling you all this is because I want you to know that we really have experienced the full disbelief and the disrespect and the neglect of our National Health Service. Elliot's had visits from a very highly paid chronic fatigue professor who the only treatment that she offered him was to send him away for psychiatric rehabilitation for an indefinite period of time. She smilingly told me that you'll be surprised what he can do if he tried, or he'll get better when he wants to, because she, like many in the medical services, still believe that it's a psychiatric illness rather than an energy issue. And I know the same situation and stories are happening all around the globe. The new guidelines make it clear that there is no cure, no treatment for MECFS. And although that might be correct, that was just not something that I felt was acceptable to me. I wasn't prepared to spend the rest of my life, or Elliot's life, sitting in silence, spoon-feeding him every day, all day, until one of us died. And so if you're watching this, I'm assuming that you feel the same way. Because as we said in the beginning, our plan is this channel is going to educate and empower you to allow your body to heal itself, so that you don't have to be dependent on these people that don't view it as real physical illness. So in future videos, we're going to take you through testing that you can do yourself at home, because I know how hard it is to get the tests you need from the doctors. And I'm going to show you how you can analyse your results using optimal levels for your health. And we're going to ignore the test ranges that the doctors use, because those ranges tell you you're normal when you clearly aren't. So we're also going to discuss how energy is produced in the body. And we're going to go into the importance of good nutrition and who may benefit from supplements. But I'm going to be honest, because this isn't a quick fix. It's taken Elliot years to recover from being extremely severe to the moderate levels of MECFS that he has now. But in the last 12 months, he has made amazing progress. He's passed his driving test, he's passed his A-levels, and he's returned to work part-time, which is just amazing considering where he was 5 years ago. So I'm a mother, I'm not a scientist, but I really have spent a huge amount of time over the past 5 years researching and studying. And with the help of some really amazing people, one particular Australian biochemist that I have to give a shout out to is Dr. Greg Russell-Jones, and you will be hearing a lot more about him in future videos. So slowly and surely the old Elliot has returned. And he's actually a surprisingly much taller person than he was when he was 17. The thing is, we constantly hear that there's no research and no funding and no science and no testing for chronic fatigue. But that simply isn't true. It's just purely because the chronic fatigue specialists believe that it's all in your head. They've been looking in all the wrong places for the answers. That every year, astronomically huge sums of money are spent on researching energy metabolism for sports people and how they can improve their athletic performance. So the thing is, our bodies all work the same way, and we can improve our energy by using the knowledge that's out there already and the testing that's out there already. I really am not any sort of CFS ME guru. I have discovered a real love and respect for how our bodies work, and I really hope that my passion will be contagious with you. And we've just got such a lot to share with you over the next few videos. I'm going to do my best to cover the information as simply and concisely as possible, but it is quite complicated. Please do watch the next video, because it's about a supplement that was like Elliot's magic potion that switched him on. Now I'm going to hand you over to Elliot.
Welcome to what I like to call Elliot's Curiosity Corner, a place where I like to share a totally random fact that I found out this week. Did you know what the word hippopotomonstrosis quipedaliophobia means? I didn't until today, but it means the fear of long words. Quite ironic, isn't it? However, please be advised that this is not a genuine medical condition, but it is a quite funny play on words. I hope you found that as interesting as I did, and I hope to see you again in another video.